What really broke my heart and a lot of tribal leaders is that Indian country was targeted.
This hits on so many different layers.
We have 29 tribes in this state, and it was not only was Washington targeted, but Idaho and Montana. Montana has 7 tribes. The Blackfeet Nation, my tribe, I can't even tell you how many fentanyl overdoses that I've heard about in the last 8 years. Young people have died.
The ramifications of this is going to be very wide and widespread when it all plays out.
Well, welcome again to Unfiltered. I'm Enrique Cerna, and joining me, of course, is Debora Juarez, former Seattle City Council member and former president of the Seattle City Council, and also Omari, Salisbury, the founder of Converge Media. Let's move on to something very serious that happened recently, and that was there was a federal indictment that was handed down. This is a tough story. In which it was a drug trafficking ring here in Seattle. 14 people were indicted. In connection with a multi-state fentanyl drug trafficking organization. And the thing that was really shocking about this is that among the people that were indicted was executive director of the Southeast Network Safety Net, and that was Marty Jackson. And she's also a community group that's been part of the Boys and Girls Club of King County. She also has family members that were also part of being indicted for that. This is a very serious thing. Obviously, this is she's been indicted, but she's not been convicted of anything. Marty Jackson, full disclosure, has been on the Chino and Chicano podcast. I think many you guys know her. She's come before the city council when you were a council member, Debora Juarez, and I know you know her well in the community, Omari. This is really a tough thing to have happen because we're talking about a drug that is, really just killing people in our community, but also it's part of the indictment that the drugs were being distributed in one of the tribal communities, I believe the Lummi community. So anyway, your reaction, let's start with you, Omari.
This plays out like this. This is horrible. I mean, it's just horrible. So many different levels. First and foremost, just on the fentanyl level, this drug, I've yet, and I know it happens, but I've yet to personally meet anybody that I know that got addicted to fentanyl who's off fentanyl. You know what I'm saying? It's such a dangerous, it's such a killer drug. And I think we'd all agree it's different. Marijuana is legal now, but it's such a killer drug. And then they talk about the quantity and then the targeting, but then on top of that, the connection to the organization for that's working on violence intervention and everything else. This hits on so many different layers, and I think that ultimately I fear that the ramifications of this is going to be very wide and widespread when it all plays out. But it was stunning.
Yeah, it was just shocking. I mean, it just shocked me since I knew Marty and since she had been on my podcast. Debora Juarez, your thoughts?
I obviously agree with everything what you guys have said and about fentanyl. We have been putting out the clarion call about fentanyl in Indian country for almost a decade, but the last 5 years have been the most horrendous. And I think besides being shocked that it was Marty in Indian country, what really broke my heart and a lot of tribal leaders is that Indian country was targeted. We have 29 tribes in this state, and it was not only was Washington targeted, but Idaho and Montana. Montana has 7 tribes. The Blackfeet Nation, my tribe, I can't even tell you how many fentanyl overdoses that I've heard about in the last 8 years. Young people have died. I just learned yesterday in Alaska, the highest rate of fentanyl overdoses is Native American and Alaska Native men in Anchorage. and then was another place. And one of the reasons why it breaks my heart is because two things. In Indian country, we don't hunt bloodlines. And that's what it felt like. And the other part is because we were vulnerable, because in Indian country, you have a jurisdictional criminal law patchwork between the feds, the tribe, and sometimes the state. And it really hurts that we can't go after non-Indians, tribal people who are not members, yes, but non-Indians who actually come on our reservation. This has been going on as long as I worked for the Bureau before law school, but that's another story. They understand, this is the drug cartels, they understand in Indian country that you can get away because there's so much, like our reservation is 1.3 million acres, it's very vast, and you can get away, same with Northern California before marijuana became legal, and other places, and it's coming out of Arizona and through tribes. And I'm not saying tribes have clean hands, either some tribal members, but I think the gut punch for me is that fentanyl has ravaged Indian country. And the second part is that we were targeted and we were prey. And the third part is, if this is indeed true and everyone is innocent until proven guilty, that this is a community member and family and somebody that I look to. It breaks my heart. I think people felt more saddened and hurt, and then came the anger. But a lot of us who practiced in Indian country and outside of and understand the jurisdictional patchwork and the conflicts, we're just sitting ducks for that. And people eventually, and they have been taking advantage of it. We found that with missing murdered Indigenous women and girls, we found that with other drugs, with crack and, methamphetamine. And I mean, this is just a more powerful drug that has showed up higher on the radar because it is so deadly. And as we were talking earlier in the podcast, Tulalip had, I think it was last spring, their fentanyl conference up at Tulalip, but it wasn't just tribes there. It was every community health organization you could think of beyond Indian Health Services, Seattle Indian Health Board, other groups. These are hospitals, clinics, addiction centers, and tribal leaders that are focusing on that. And the biggest number one thing is, how do we catch these people that bring this poison to our people? And where is the enforcement on the law side, and where's the money for helping with services in addiction? And so to read and to hear that there was a group that is a person in our group that was committed to stopping violence and being a violence interrupter in King County, that they targeted Indian country. That made me sad.
Yeah. It is shocking. It is sad. And of course, again, she has to go through due process along with the others that were indicted here. So we'll see how this plays out. But I think there's no doubt we're going to hear more about this, and it could be bigger in its impact all the way around. So
I think it's going to be bigger. I think there's going to be more because as a federal indictment with the U.S. Attorney's Office, it takes a lot more than just, finger pointing or even a few things here. They actually build a case, whether it's RICO or, you have to have so many enablers to make that kind of crime happen, and to use banks and services and people and traveling. That's like a whole enterprise. It isn't just a one-off thing. And I just have a feeling the other shoe hasn't dropped.
Yeah.
And I just want to really speak out firmly against this. And, we want to respect it. It's innocent until proven guilty, man. But, man, if this is true, and I would say this because, and I just want to lead by example here. We'll see what happens, but what is true, sometimes in our community, man, we don't say nothing. We don't say anything. And we'll let everything else take the blame, and it's the system and everything else and all this and that, man. I hope to God, I don't know, but I hope to God this is whatever, man. But, as us community members, we have to stop being quiet. We're quiet around drug trafficking. We're quiet when our kids get murdered. We're quiet when our old folks get assaulted. We're quiet. We give people who perpetrate crimes against us in our community more deference and grace than we give the victims that they've impacted. And that's just the truth. And we need to stop being quiet about these things. We need to start making noise. And I promise you this, that although according to this indictment, they're saying that the Lummi Nation and other nations was targeted. Believe me, there was a lot of other collateral damage, I'm pretty sure, of all kinds of other communities that was in here as well. And we need not be quiet. And so, I'm going to keep my eye on this, but I just know us as a community, far too often, horrific things happen in our community, and we're just quiet, and we just need to stop being quiet.
And Omari, let me ask you something about why do you, and I'll say the same thing about the indigenous community, Native American community too. We were quiet about missing murder, domestic violence, sexual abuse, trafficking, sometimes at the hands of our own men. And we're quiet. Indian women had to stand up and be the ones to say something. But why do you think, and maybe Enrique too, you're part of this too, why are we quiet? Is it because we don't want to, quote unquote, air our dirty laundry? It's easier to say it's white people. Is it easier? But then we don't take accountability. Why is that? I'm 65 years old and I still don't know why.
I'm 71 and I don't know why. I mean, I think, you bring up a really good point. I mean, the outrage when things happen, we hear outrage when there's an incident of some sort, the gun violence, we hear that, we see that. I think what tends to happen is that it's sort of like people, you have the outrage for a short amount of time, and then people go back and it just melts away. It's like, how do you keep that outrage going so that it makes a difference? I think, we have a responsibility in our own communities to call our communities on this stuff. And not just, we're talking about so many things that are of crimes, but we need to call our people out, and we need to just say that, this is not something that we can allow. We have I think a history in all of our communities of having this respect for our elders and all of these things and traditions. And I think we definitely try to do all that, but somehow, we're not keeping with it.
We've normalized this. We've normalized this. We're not supposed to live like this. This isn't how we're supposed to be living. It's not okay for us to have murderers walking amongst us. It's not okay for people to sit there and just be quiet. Why? This is a us issue. This is us. This is us. And it's like, when do we get sick and tired of getting sick and tired? But we don't get sick and tired no more because our skin has grown so tough. There's so many layers upon layers upon layers of everything that, man, this is not how we're supposed to live, but we've accepted it and we're okay with it. But then it takes something else, like someone outside of our community, to come in and perpetrate something against us, and we're outraged. But how are we not outraged every day that these young people are out here killing each other? They're killing. We're dying. And it's just prayers and whatever. But it's because we've become okay with this. We've become okay. We found ways to normalize it. We found ways to make excuses. We found all of these ways to stare. And in doing so, we've done ourselves such a disjustice. And we've set what we wonder why this younger generation is all the way off the hook, because, man, the generation of their parents, so many things this is just a normal way to live. No one's challenged that. This is the big problem in this city and probably across America, that we're okay being quiet. We're okay with our elders living in fear, scared to leave their home. We're okay where it's like, man, these kids are just running home from school. I was at Rainier Beach. They said, man, we'd be scared to go across the street to the taco truck at lunchtime. And somehow we're okay with that, man. That's where the root of this issue, a lot of it is, man. And we've normalized this subhuman way that we now live and we operate. And so many ethnic groups, people of color, whatever you want to call it, in our own situations and corners of how we live, we've normalized the very worst of humanity. against ourselves and our own community.
Yeah, and it's it's beyond our communities. Let's face it. We see it in our national politics. It hits our local politics. It hits people every day. There was a story in the Seattle Times about how now even reporters. Of course, I'm sure reporters have always had to deal with this to some extent, but concern about your own safety these days and what you report. Comes back to our lack of our incivility and our disdain for our fellow person. And it is sad. And I don't know about you guys, it stresses me out. It really stresses me out. I'm tired of this stuff. Really tired of this.
If I can give an example to Omari where certain abnormal behavior was normalized and glamorized and it became people thought, and I'll just give this because I feel I have some of the authority to share this, is there used to be this thing that being indigenous or native or Blackfeet or whatever is the drunk Indian. And that was a joke. And it became like, if you were a real Indian, you drank. It took our people at least 4 generations to unwind that stereotype that being native, being indigenous, being Blackfeet does not mean that you're a drunk. That sobriety is not to be laughed at, but embraced. That sobriety, and even just if you don't have a problem, quote unquote, with alcohol, that's a virtue that you're passing on. It's breaking the cycle. And that took, you're right, Omari and Enrique, us taking responsibility and people speaking up saying it's not okay for kids to start drinking at 12, and being indigenous does not mean being drinking. That's not part of our culture. That was brought to us. That brought us down. That was a poison that fractured families, killed off all of our people, brought in depression and brought in the sadness of hopelessness. And I think we really turned that around to the point where we've gotten rid of that stereotype. I think a big chunk of it. So then what happens is that, yes, we have the drug issue that came in, but I want to just focus on the alcohol issue because that was something Omari brought up about, where did we go wrong? We started accepting in our community fabric and our identity that guns, gangs, and violence is what makes you a Black man. Where do we start normalizing that shit? I'm sorry, that stuff. Is it our music? What is it? Now, I can't speak for that community, but for my community is when we started really pushing hard, Native women, about our babies being born with fetal alcohol syndrome, domestic violence, and then now the big push in the last decade has been changing our diets, sugar, all alcohol, all these things that were bad for us. We're not handing out, candy, and we're teaching our people and rewilding and going back to traditional foods, going back to our traditional ways of knowing things that we know are good for us. But you need those, what they call the ravens in those communities, to be the ones to say it and to call each other out and hold each other accountable, even at the risk sometimes. And I've seen it. And we have some brothers and sisters who you guys are friends with too, where you get into some trouble and you get excluded from some groups from saying the truth.
Yeah, that's very true.
But
it is.
I will keep doing that. I will keep doing that if that saves the lives of my nieces and nephews and my aunties and my cousins. And again, if I can just quickly go back to what happened with the big drug bust. Again, what pains me, what hurts me the most is that this group saw our people and we became prey. That's the part that hurts me the most.
I think we've got to find something to end positively on. And I'm not quite sure.
We could talk about a team. Me and Omari, both our teams didn't make it.
I know.
The Mariners didn't make it.
Let's hope that the Mariners, Omari, can turn things around for this next year.
And you know what? I want to say this. Congratulations to Kevin Martinez, his name, the president of business operations there at Seattle Mariners, man. Kevin is a real stand-up dude. You know what I'm saying? He's been with the Mariners for decades. He's just epitome of the ball club, man. Really, really great guy.
All right, some tough conversations today, and but that's why we call this Unfiltered, so that we can really just talk about things as openly and tough comments. But we need to do that, and that's why we're doing this. So hey, thank you all. We're going to talk again soon. You take care. All right.
Thank you. It's good seeing you guys.